All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to officially welcome everyone to the 2019 Martin Luther King Jr. Convocation. Very excited that you all are here today, even though some of you had to be, that's okay. Still glad that you're here. But our theme this year is redefining radical. So as we go through the program, I want you to really dwell on what that means. And you're going to hear some great excerpts from some of our student speakers as they are speaking excerpts from some of the civil rights activists throughout American history, and what ideas that are in those passages are radical. What does radical really mean? And so that's one of the big challenges I want everyone to think about today, and to approach things with an open mind. One of the best things that I could think of is some of the most educated people are people that really try to look at things objectively from different perspectives and then formulate their opinion. We've been trained in different paradigms coming from different places, and we're all gathered here in this shared space, and we're trying to figure out how to navigate that together, and it really takes an openness of mind and heart in order to do so. It's sometimes we have to bother to care. There was an event I attended yesterday, and one of the panelists talked about bothering to care, bothering to love, because it's not something that we necessarily have to do, but it's something that is necessary to do. And that redefining radical is not socially negative, but socially necessary. And when we think of all the things, even amongst our own campus, what does it mean to be radical? To think that a university would have a food and hygiene item pantry for students that need to access it. That's radical. That's a move that's radical. And now we're seeing that throughout higher education, where colleges are doing that for students on campus. There are so many other things that we're doing that are seen as radical. So I appreciate your attendance today, and I hope that you're able to take away something both to impact you and the communities around you as you go and engage in conversations with family. Sometimes students always tell me some of the hardest discussions they've had is with family after they've learned something here and they go back to their family and they hear things and they're like, how do I intervene in this conversation? How do I take my newfound knowledge and really establish that to members of my family, especially those that are greatly respected? And so how do I have this discussion with them? And so I'm hoping that you're able to take some key things away from this convocation, and it inspires you to learn more doing your own research and connecting with the resources on campus that can help you navigate those things. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Chaplain Judy Guine-Utzler for the invocation. Thank you.
Please join with me in a moment of silence. Source of light and love and creation, we gather to honor, celebrate, and remember a man who was radical. Martin Luther King Jr. was radical enough to fight a revolution with peaceful protest and disobedience. He was radical enough to choose love over hate. He was radical in the way he spoke uncomfortable truths about race and money and war to leaders who didn't want to listen. He was radical because he knew that he could die and was still willing to speak. And he was murdered. Decades later, we have made his radicalism into slogans and quotations to make easy the difficult path he invited us to walk. But we know that this path to justice and equity and peace is not easy. And so we ask you, make us more radical. Help us to notice injustice around us, even when those injustices do not affect us. And help us to raise our voices in solidarity with those who suffer, even when our knees shake. Make us more radical. When the status quo lets us off the hook for the needs of others, help us to be radically kind allies for change. Make us more radical. Teach us to look at the world as beloved community, to notice the gifts and blessings and beauty that surround us, and teach us to have a noble outrage when what is hateful or harmful is instead held in esteem. Help us to hold fast to what is good. We ask all of this, certain of your love and grace. Amen. I am pleased to invite Joyce Daniel Kane and the Otterbein Gospel Choir to lead us in the Black National Anthem.
Everyone could please stand. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us, facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. You may be seated.
The word radical is often used these days to describe something extreme, something to fear, or something that is best avoided in order to maintain stability. In fact, the word radical simply means something that is very different from what is routine. Isn't this the goal of social justice? Disrupt a status quo that insists on injustice. To redefine radical simply means to recognize it, not as something to be feared or avoided, but as the only basis for real change.
Martin Luther King Jr., 1967, where do we go from here, chaos or community? White Americans must recognize that justice for Black people cannot be achieved without radical changes in the structure of our society. The comfortable, the entrenched, the privileged cannot continue to tremble at the prospect of change of the status quo. This is a multiracial nation where all groups are dependent on one another. There is no separate white path to power and fulfillment short of disaster that does not share with the Black aspirations for freedom and human dignity. Harvey Milk, 1978, The Hope Speech. The Black community made up its mind to that a long time ago. that the myths against blacks can only be dispelled by electing black leaders, so the black community could be judged by the leaders and not by the myths or black criminals. The Latino community must not be judged by Latin criminals or myths. The Asian community must not be judged by Asian criminals or myths. The Italian community must not be judged by the mafia myths. And the time has come when the gay community must not be judged by our criminals and myths. Like every other group, we must be judged by our leaders and by those who themselves are gay, those who are visible. For invisible, we remain in limbo. A myth, a person with no parents, no brothers, no sisters, no friends who are straight, no important positions in employment. A gay person in office can set a tone, can command respect, not only from the larger community, but from young people in our community who need both examples and hope. In 1847, when Otterbein was founded, it was done so with the principle that Otterbein would be a school for all people, regardless of race or gender. And a little over 120 years after Otterbein was founded, Dr. King and Harvey Milk saw that our nation was not an understanding, inclusive, or loving place for all people, regardless of race, gender, or sexuality. Their words were not meant to fall on closed ears or closed minds. Their words were meant to inspire us all to work to make this nation, this world, a more inclusive, understanding, and loving place. Today, decades since Dr. King and Harvey Milk spoke those words, almost 2 centuries after Otterbein was founded, we've come a long way. But the ideals of inclusion and understanding have certainly not been fully achieved in this nation or on this campus. So I ask that you all listen to what is said here today, reflect on it, and find the areas in your own lives where you can work to make this campus, this world, and this nation a better, more inclusive, more understanding, and more loving place. Thank you.
Something that is radical is uncomfortable because it requires change and insistence on change for the cause of justice. But we cannot grow and improve and develop unless we go to uncomfortable places.
Malcolm X, 1965, from Not Just an American Problem, but a World Problem. When they want to suppress and oppress the Black community, what do? They take the statistics, and through the press, they feed them to the public. They make it appear that the role of crime in the Black community is higher than it is anywhere else. What does this do? This is a very skillful message used by racists to make the whites who aren't racist think that the rate of crime in the Black community is so high. This keeps the Black community in the image of a criminal. It makes it appear that anyone in the Black community is a criminal. This is skill. This skill is called image making. They hold you in check through this science of imagery. They even make you look down upon yourself by giving you a bad image of yourself. Some of our own Black people have eaten this image themselves and digested it until they themselves don't want to live in the Black community. They don't want to be around Black people themselves. As an engaged member of the Otterbein community, I challenge us to be very astute and aware of the messages that we are being fed through media platforms. Take some time to research on your own the multiple sides to every story. Take some time, who is creating the narrative and why? What language is being used to describe people and communities? This will help you discover the validity or invalidity of these messages. Remember that observation is not the best teacher. Engaged proximity is. Those around you that counter your biases and stereotypes are not the exception. They represent a much larger population that does not fit into the negative messages we are being exposed to. Thank you.
It's ironic to note that what is truly extreme, fearful, and best avoided for a more just society is, in fact, the culture as it is. Our status quo is often violent in its attempts to prevent change.
"5 years ago, John F. Kennedy said, 'Those who make peaceful revolution impossible will make violent revolution inevitable.' Increasingly, by choice or by accident, this is the role our nation has taken. The role of those who make peaceful revolution impossible by refusing to give up the privileges and the pleasures that come from immense profits of overseas investments. I am convinced that if we are going to get on the right side of the world revolution, we as a nation must undergo a radical revolution of values. We must rapidly begin the shift from a thing-oriented society to a person-oriented society. When machines and computers, profit motives, and property rights are considered more important than people, the giant triplets of racism, extreme materialism, and militarism are incapable of being conquered." That's from Martin Luther King Jr.'s 1967 speech, Beyond Vietnam. Dr. King's quote provides us an important and relevant message. His emergent urge for us to shift into a society that cares more for its people than for things is especially important during a time when bigotry continues to disrupt the lives of people around the world. Similar to how he drew ties between Vietnam and the American Civil Rights Movement during the 60s, we can also draw ties between the Palestinian-Israeli conflict and the Black Lives Matter movement today. Doing so challenges us to empathize and understand the interconnectedness of global issues. Following Dr. King's words, it's our duty as human beings to make ourselves aware of both domestic and international injustices and to do everything within our own power, including putting pressure on our own leaders to make political and social change that challenges the systemic inequities that exist today. Please welcome our Otterbein Gospel Choir to the stage.
Alpha and Omega, true and living God, in your presence is the fullness of joy. Jesus Christ, my Savior, you are worthy of the praise. I glorify your name forevermore. Magnificent and mighty, King of kings you are, Savior and deliverer, bright and morning star, holy and righteous, matchless Lamb of God, magnificent and mighty, King of kings you are. Alpha and Omega, true and living God, in your presence is the fullness of joy. Jesus Christ, my Savior, you are worthy of the praise. I glorify your name forevermore. Magnificent and mighty, King of kings you are, Savior and deliverer, bright and morning star, holy and righteous, matchless Lamb of God, magnificent and mighty, King of kings you are.
King of kings you are.
What is truly radical in our culture is love, compassion, generosity, gratitude, and forgiveness. These are the characteristics of a beloved community.
Martin Luther King Jr., 1957, Love Your Enemies, preached at Dexter Avenue Baptist Church. When the opportunity presents itself for you to defeat your enemy, that is the time which you must not do it. There will come a time, in many instances, when the person who hates you the most, the person who has misused you the most, the person who has gossiped about you the most, the person who has spread false rumors about you the most, there will come a time when you have an opportunity to defeat that person. It might be in terms of a recommendation for a job. It might be in terms of helping that person to make some move in life. That's the time you must not do it. That is the meaning of love. In the final analysis, love is not the sentimental something that we talk about. It's not merely an emotional something. Love is creative, understanding goodwill for all men. It is a refusal to defeat any individual. When you rise to the level of love, of its great beauty and power, you seek only to defeat evil systems. Individuals who happen to be caught up in that system, you love, but you seek to defeat the system. Shirley Chisholm, 1969, Equal Rights for Women. It is true that part of the problem has been that women have not been aggressive in demanding their rights. This was also true of the Black population for many years. They submitted to oppression and even cooperated with it. Women have done the same thing, but now there is an awareness of this situation, particularly among the younger segment of the population. As in the field of equal rights for Blacks, Spanish Americans, the Indians, and other groups, laws will not change such deep-seated problems overnight, but they can be used to provide protection for those who are most abused and to begin the process of evolutionary change by compelling the insensitive majority to re-examine its unconscious attitudes. Thank you.
Martin Luther King's dream of justice and peace continues to be radical. It is radical to think that we can overcome the racism that is this nation's most appalling evil. But giving up on that dream is unthinkable.
All of the speeches you've heard and will hear today have a resonating message for our world that we're living in. The following one in particular, I think, is important for those of us who are pursuing equality and equity and reminding us what exactly it is that we're fighting for. Martin Luther King Jr., 1964, Nobel Peace Prize acceptance speech. I accept this award today with an abiding faith in America and an audacious faith in the future of mankind. I refuse to accept despair as the final response to the ambiguities of history. I refuse the idea that the isness of man's present nature makes him morally incapable of reaching up for the eternal oughtness that forever confronts him. I refuse to accept the idea that man is mere flotsam and jetsam in the river of life, unable to influence the unfolding events which surround him. I refuse to accept the view that mankind is so tragically bound to the starless midnight of racism and war that the bright daybreak of peace and brotherhood can never become reality. I have the audacity to believe that peoples everywhere can have 3 meals a day for their bodies, education and culture for their minds, and dignity, equality, and freedom for their spirits.
Bayard Rustin, 1965, Negro Revolution. It seems to me, always in the process of social change, there are 3 jobs to be done. One is the job of analysis, and I'm sure that you people are deeply involved in that job. There is, secondly, the job of synthesis, seeing the nature of the future society, but in a way which is not so rashly blueprinted that it becomes silly. The third job is that there would be in motion in that society an element to make politically possible what is foreseen. Let's think about what those words mean for us today. Who do we want to be as a country? What about as a university? How do we not just simply coexist, but to productively share spaces, experiences, and goals together without disregarding our differences? The only way is unselfishly together.
Reverend Gayle Fisher Stewart spent 20 years working as a police officer for the Washington, D.C. Metropolitan Police Department. She joined the department in 1972, 4 years after riots destroyed parts of the city following the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. She brought over 40 years of experience as an active police officer, as a consultant to law enforcement agency, and as a university-level teacher of criminal justice to her call to ordained ministry. She completed the Anglican Studies program at Virginia Theological Seminary in 2015. While there, the civil unrest in Ferguson, Missouri inspired her to dream of a church that is known for its interest in justice and to apply for the Evangelism for the 21st Century grant to establish the center at Calvary. She has worked tirelessly to host forums about race, social justice, inequality, and policing. She has established a network of partnership between the center and the diocese, local nonprofits, and national policing organization. She currently serves as the Associate Rector of the Calvary Episcopal Church, where she is the founder of the Center for the Study of Faith and Justice. After the Gospel Choir's next selection, the next voice you will hear will be that of Reverend Gayle Fisher Stewart. Thank you.
Shut the door, keep out the devil. Shut the door, keep the devil in the night. Shut the door, keep out the devil. Light the candle, everything is alright. Light the candle, everything is alright. Shut the door,
Keep out the devil. Shut the door, keep the devil in the night. Shut the door, keep out the devil. Light the candle, everything is alright. Light the candle, everything is alright. Shut the door, keep out the devil. Shut the door, keep the devil in the night. Shut the door, keep out the devil. Light the candle, everything is alright. Light the candle, everything is alright. Shut the door, keep out the devil. Shut the door, keep the devil in the night. Shut the door, keep out the devil. Light the candle, everything is alright. Light the candle, everything is alright.
Oh, when I was a baby child,
Shut the door, keep out the devil.
good and bad was just a game.
Shut the door, keep the devil in the night.
Though many years and many trials
Shut the door, keep out the devil.
prove to me they're not the same.
Shut the door, keep the devil in the night. Shut the door, keep out the devil. Shut the door, keep the devil in the night. Shut the door, keep out the devil. Light the candle, everything is alright. Light the candle, everything is alright.
My mama used to sing this song.
Shut the door, keep out the devil.
Papa used to sing it too.
Shut the door, keep the devil in the night.
Then Jesus came and took them home.
Shut the door, keep out the devil.
Now I sing this song for you.
Shut the door, keep the devil in the night. Shut the door, keep out the devil. Shut the door, keep the devil in the night. Shut the door, keep out the devil. Light the candle, everything is alright. Light the candle, everything is alright.
Shut the door. Shut the door. Shut the door.
Say a prayer, he won't be back no more. Say a prayer, he won't be back no more.
Shut the door.
Shut the door.
Shut the door.
Say a prayer, he won't be back no more. Say a prayer, he won't be back no more.
Shut the door.
Shut the door.
Shut the door.
Say a prayer, he won't be back no more. Say a prayer, he won't be back no more. Shut the door, keep out the devil. Shut the door, keep the devil in the night. Shut the door, keep out the devil.
Light a candle, everything is alright. Light a candle, everything is alright.
Shut the door, keep out the devil.
Shut the door, keep the devil in the night. Shut the door, keep out the devil. Light a candle, everything is alright. Light a candle, everything is alright. Shut the door, keep out the devil. Shut the door, keep the devil in the night. Shut the door, keep out the devil. Light a candle, everything is alright. Light a candle, everything is alright. Light a candle, everything is alright. Light a candle.
We are going to shut the door and keep out the devil. Amen, amen. It is so good. It is so good to be on a college campus. Good afternoon. Okay, this is worse than church on Sunday morning. Good afternoon. Man, I mean, for me, there's something special about being on a college campus. It's kind of otherworldly. You leave the world out there and you come on campus and you get all of this knowledge that you then leave here and take it back out to change the world. It is good to be here, and I thank you for the invitation to be with you on this afternoon. In the words of Ella Baker, in order for us poor and oppressed people to become part of a society that is meaningful, the system under which we now exist has to be radically changed. This means that we are going to have to learn to think in radical terms. Ella said, I use the term radical in its original meaning, getting down to and understanding the root cause. It means facing a system that does not lend itself to your needs and devising means by which you change that system. Ella Baker, civil rights activist, community organizer, wrote these words in 1969. Martin Luther King had been killed. His dream had still not been achieved. In the book Ella Baker and the Black Freedom Movement, Barbara Ramsey writes, Ella Baker spent her entire adult life trying to change the system. Somewhere along the way, she recognized that her goal was not a single end, but rather an ongoing means, that is, a process. Radical change for Ella Baker was about a persistent and protracted process of discourse, debate, consensus, reflection, and struggle. If larger and larger numbers of communities were engaged in such a process, she reasoned, day in and day out, year after year, the revolution would be well underway. Ella Baker understood that laws, structures, and institutions had to change to correct injustice and oppression. But part of the process had to involve the oppressed people, had to involve regular, ordinary people, infusing new meanings into the concept of democracy and finding their own individual and collective power to determine their lives and shape the direction of history. These were the radical terms that Ella Baker thought in, and the radical ideas she fought for with her mind and her body. Just as the end for her was not a scripted utopia, but another phase of struggle, the means of getting there were not scripted either. Baker's theory of social change and political organizing was inscribed in her practice. Her ideas were written in her work, a coherent body of lived text, meaning her entire body, for nearly 60 years. She lived an incarnational life. Her entire body was involved in the process, a struggle to challenge society, its systems, so it would serve the needs of all people. And as we reflect these past few days on the life, death, and legacy of Martin Luther King Jr., the rebel, because he was a rebel, he was radical, and he was murdered by this country because he thought America could be better. As we reflect on his life and death and legacy, let us also reflect on the words that gave birth to this country. In Congress, July 4th, 1776, the unanimous Declaration of the United States of America, and united was not capitalized. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, among them being life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That when any time, any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object advances a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies. And such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. And then these former colonists, now citizens of the new United States, laid out their grievances, a long list of grievances that justified their rebellion. This country, as we know it, was born in rebellion. Radicals called colonists believed it their right to free themselves from an oppressive regime, a regime that denied them basic human rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They wrote these lofty, hope-filled words, and a new republic was created, even as the contradictions were ignored. The subjugation of European indentured servants, the genocide of native peoples, the stolen lives and labor, the brutality inflicted upon, and the dehumanization of Africans under that peculiar institution called slavery. To be radical, as we have heard, is anyone who challenges the status quo, regardless of whether or not that status quo is lawful or unlawful, regardless of whether or not it is right or wrong. Rosa Parks was radical. She challenged the status quo, she challenged the law. A black woman in the Deep South dared to challenge the laws that were legal but discriminated against black people. She dared to challenge the legal and power structures of her day that said that she did not have the right to sit anywhere she wanted on public transportation after she had paid her money. Viola Liuzzo, a white woman from the North, a white woman, a mother, a housewife, a man's wife, because that's how women were known if they were married, as a man's wife. She dared to leave her home, her comfortable, privileged home, and travel south to transport black people in her car, violating societal norms, and she was murdered by the Ku Klux Klan. Diane Nash, a student, she should have been in class, like you. That's why her parents sent her to college, to get an education. That's why her parents sacrificed, not to challenge the racial norms. Keep your head low. Don't challenge white folks, don't start a ruckus. But she upset the status quo and integrated lunch counters, a simple act with ripple effects. Fannie Lou Hamer, a voting and women's rights activist who coined the term Mississippi appendectomy. Her uterus was removed. She was violated by a white doctor who removed her uterus when he was only supposed to remove a tumor. As she protested racism and white supremacy for her outspokenness, she had to live with injuries that followed her to the grave. A blood clot in her eye, kidney damage, and injury to her leg. These women and more, men, women, and children, were radical. They challenged the status quo. They dared to be political, to turn the political system upside down. And when we look at the word politics, it comes from the Greek, meaning not of government, but of the people, a gathering of citizens. The source of power in America is not the government. It is not Washington, D.C. It is not Capitol Hill. It is us. The power is us. We are the source of power in this country. We, the people, all of the people. And when the people show cause of their oppression, when the people show cause that the system of government is not in their best interests, the people have the right, the obligation to be radical and change it. But this country has a habit of tamping down rebellion from those who don't fit the proper mold, or those who rebel against causes that some folks think should not be causes. And over the centuries, we have seen blacks and migrants punished for insisting that they be treated as human beings. We have seen labor unions attacked because they believe that their workers should be protected and paid a fair wage. We have witnessed women jailed because they demanded the right to vote. We have seen those whose religious persuasion is not Christianity tormented, persecuted. And yet, when neo-Nazis protested in Charlottesville, Virginia, the leader of the free world believed them to be good people. The denial of basic human rights around the world challenge us to look beyond the status quo for responses to the pain of our times. How is it that despots, narcissists find their ways in positions of power, positions of leadership, when the people actually hold the power? It happens because the people fail to coalesce around a common good, not just my race, my clan, my tribe, my faith, but common good. And unfortunately, it seems that the words common good have disappeared from social discourse. It's all about me and my and mine. And yet, there is a peak. There is a glimpse of people being radical who are called to challenge the status quo, who are continuing the civil rights movement. We see the women's movement. We see Me Too, Occupy, young people for gun control. We see a renewed spirituality based on social activism that is beginning to reassert itself. It stems not from hating what is wrong and trying to fight it. Rather, it is from loving what could be and making a reality to see that it becomes real. The establishment of the beloved community, nothing less, will heal our hearts, and nothing else will heal the world. And I am personally heartened by the young and diverse group I actually do see on Capitol Hill, at least on the Democratic side of Congress. It is up to us to hold each and every representative and senator accountable to all the people. Ella Baker was valedictorian of her high school class. And in 1927, she challenged her class to awake youth of the land and accept this noble challenge of salvaging the strong ship of civilization by the anchors of right, justice, and love. Her words are just as relevant today. It is the task of your generation to recreate the American political system, to awaken from our culture of distraction and self-serving individualism, and to re-engage the process of democracy that lacks soulfulness and hope. You are called to renew hearts, renew nations, and ultimately to renew the world. Change, if there is going to be change, if the world is going to be changed, it is up to you. And as we look at the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Emancipation Proclamation, and King's letter from a Birmingham jail, each and every one of them proclaim our highest hopes, what we hope this country, what we hope this world can be. But those words have to be made real. The words have to be given life, and it will take you, a new generation, being radical to overturn the structures that keep those words mere letters on paper. We have hope. While at the same time, slavery, the Trail of Tears, the Vietnam and Iraq wars, eugenics, forced sterilization of the mentally ill and the poor and the disabled, the migrants at our southern border, systemic racism and economic injustice, mass incarceration, official hypocrisy, violence, and exalted militarism, all of these form a force field around our hearts, keeping us from giving these words life until someone steps up, until someone takes a chance, breaks the status quo, and borrowing the words from civil rights activist Fannie Lou Hamer, declares, "We are sick and tired of being sick and tired." Ella Baker said, "I didn't break the rules, but I challenged the rules." You are called to be radical and challenge the rules. You are called to challenge what in the 12th richest country in the world, we see what goes for life. When 40% of Americans have a difficult time affording the basics of rent and food, more than 45 million, 14.5% of all Americans and more than 1/5 of our children live beneath the poverty level. Millions of children go to school each day and those schools do not meet the minimum safety rules. They don't have enough school supplies. Some don't even have working toilets. Millions more of our children are abandoned, neglected, and abused. 135,000 children take guns to school each day. And every single day, 19 children are killed or injured by gun violence. With less than 5% of the world's population, we have 25% of the world's prison population, where racial disparities in arrest and sentencing are rampant. Michelle Alexander has written that incarceration, particularly of people of color, is the new Jim Crow. Incarceration is big business. Brian Stevenson has written that slavery did not end, it just evolved. It's called the penal system. We live in a country where student loan debt is $1.5 trillion, where young people, people like you, are enslaved to debt. The average student borrower owes $32,000. I don't know any student that owes that little. Most of the students I know owe $90,000 and up. How are you going to buy a house? How are you going to buy a car? How are you going to get out of your parents' basements? And the parents are asking the same questions too. You, young people, can call for a year of jubilee, where all debts, starting with that one, wiped out. Start with a clean slate. We find in this country that the needs of our business institutions are consistently placed above the needs of our people, and corporations have been given the status of personhood, profit over people. That should be the motto on our money, as opposed to "In God We Trust." It should be profit over people. The spirit of rebellion, of being radical, is alive, but it is sluggish. Civil disobedience, working within the system to right the wrong, should be an everyday occurrence. What happened to the spirit of rebellion without which this country, with all its faults, would not exist? Sometimes we've given up our power, as too often we have also given up our principles. And while our nation was literally created out of rebellion against an entrenched and tyrannical status quo, for too many of the last 50 years, the average American is more apt to rebel about not being able to tweet, rather than the slow erosion of our democratic freedoms. Now we are having to play catch up. Historian Marion Williamson wrote, Thomas Jefferson wrote to James Madison in 1787, "I hold it that a little rebellion now and then is a good thing, and as necessary in the political world as storms in the physical. Healthy rebellion is not a negative act, but rather a politically legitimate expression of justified dissatisfaction. Dissatisfied people are dissatisfied for a reason. And where we have no taste for rebellion, we have no taste for freedom. Those who fought to create a new country committed treason against King George III. If they had failed and been convicted, the sentence would be death. But they did it anyway. Freedom was worth dying for. It is our task to look to the past and also to the future. And if we are radical, it can transform anger. It can also lead to something called divine rebellion. Civil disobedience is divine rebellion. Civil disobedience leads to nonviolent revolution, and it leads to the complete transformation of how we live with ourselves and how we live with each other. Civil disobedience leads to a revisioning of the entire world. Theologian Walter Brueggemann would call this prophetic imagination, the ability to imagine how this country should be and live every day as if it were true right now. We are called to transform hearts and minds and also to transform this country. We are called to be people where our very lives become our message, where our lives are walking billboards. I am the change I want to see. For King, as he looked at a country in which he lived, and if he were alive today, the answer to what he saw and what he would see today is revolution. A revolution in our priorities, our values, our public life, and our discourse. For Ella Baker, she first saw the need for herself and then for all of us to be a powerful source for social change. If she stepped on this campus today, because she always critiqued where she was and she always critiqued the people with whom she was. She critiqued organizations of which she was a part. If she stepped on this campus today, would she wonder if Otterbein was a hotbed of radical thinking? King and Ella, they were radical. They were radicals. And as we reflect on their lives and their legacies, the highest honor we can pay to them, the highest honor we can give to them, is to walk in their radical footsteps, to push down the walls, every single wall that separates us, wherever they are. To walk in their footsteps, let them be an example, to challenge the oppressive structures, and to lead the way to a new and brighter future. It is all in your hands. The torch is being passed to you. The torch has been passed to you. Lead well.
Wasn't she amazing? That was just fantastic. Thank you for the kind words. Very awesome, very awesome. It is now time to acknowledge our Peace and Justice Award recipients. Established in the honor of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the awards for peace and justice are presented annually at the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Convocation to a faculty / staff member, student, groups of students, and or an Otterbein organization. This award is presented annually at the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Convocation. Recipients should meet the following criteria: The nominee should be involved in activities on campus or in the community that serves to balance inequities, encourage like philosophies among others, raise awareness of social justice issues, promote equity and equality in the classroom and or community, teach or demonstrate the principles of nonviolence in solving problems. The Student Award. Our first award winner is a Promise House coordinator who goes beyond her role as an event planner and her quest for social justice and equality for students facing socioeconomic barriers to success goes beyond the borders of the Promise House. She, with her own initiative, started pop-up pantries around campus giving out snacks, school supplies, and personal health and hygiene items to students. Realizing that not everyone would feel comfortable coming to the pantry, she brought the necessities to them. Being a true advocate, the student listened to her peers who are commuting to campus and have expressed needs other on-campus students may not have. To remedy this, she started her commuter breakfast, taking the Promise House to the commuter lounge to encourage students to build community and take advantage of resources. Our 2019 Student MLK Peace and Justice Award winner is Kiana Hernandez. For our Faculty Staff Award, this staff member is dedicated to social justice through words and actions. He identifies and executes teaching and training in a variety of ways to educate the community in inequities. He does this in a manner that is non-confrontational and uplifting. His passion for social justice education has and will continue to make a lasting difference at Otterbein. It has made one for me as well. Please help me in congratulating Joey Otang from the Center for Student Involvement. Ben Schwartz, yes, yes.
Yep, accepting on Joey's behalf because, he had to go keep changing the world.
The last award goes to a weekly service program where Otterbein students serve as mentors, allies, and friends to 8th grade middle school girls to give them the tools to empower themselves to better equip them to be social change agents for their communities. This group, along with the 2 other girls, Chick Chat and Girl Talk, are completely ran by the Otterbein volunteers. They build the curriculum, interact with the middle school students, and recruit other Otterbein students to join the cause. The Girl Club volunteers bring so much energy when they interact with the girls at Walnut Springs. They have built relationships with most of these young students and have become a vital support system that most of the girls feel they don't have. The volunteers in this program have direct impact with these young girls and are helping shape them to self-empowered champions as well as teaching them the importance of serving the people within their own communities. Our 2019 Peace and Justice Award goes to the Center for Community Engagement's GARA organization. Will a representative from the organization please come forward to accept the award? Please give another round of applause for the 2019 MLK Junior Peace and Justice Award recipients.
In the word of Booker T. Washington, there are 2 ways of exerting one's strength. Oh, is she here? My bad. What is it? My bad. Where's the award? Oh. Here you go. My bad. I apologize for that. No. All right. In the word of Booker T. Washington, there are two ways of exerting one's strength. One is pushing down, the other is pulling up. Our hope is that you have been influenced to do the latter. Join us today from 5 to 7 p.m. in the Campus Center Lounge to celebrate Martin Luther King Jr. by serving others at our annual Pack the Mac and more event. Your direct service will impact children living in the YWCA family shelters, Westerville Area Resource Ministry clients, and Otterbein Community Garden members. Service include making plush toys, cards, a garden project, and packing backpacks. Let's come together to build a better community and honor Dr. King's legacy. We also invite you to a reception being held immediately after we conclude the convocation in Roush Hall, Fisher Gallery. I would like to invite Angel Banks and Lorelina Todd to the stage for a special recognition.
Today marks the last time the Otterbein Gospel Choir will sing at the MLK Convocation under the direction of Mrs. LaJoyce Daniel King. For the last 31 years, students have been impacted by her charismatic and tenacious spirit. Mrs. LaJoyce touches the hearts of everyone she meets and continues to create a positive impact on our lives.
Miss LaJoyce has been there through my ups and downs for the last 3 years of my college career. She can always tell when something is wrong and does everything in her power to encourage and lift me up. I remember one week I was having a very hard week, and she took the time to take me out and eat and talk. LaJoyce is by far one of the sweetest people you will ever meet, and I look forward to that one day a week that I can be graced by her presence. Next year is going to be extremely hard without you.
When a lot of us first joined gospel choir, we kind of expected it to be just like every other choir. But instead, we formed a strong bond and created a family. I remember my first day at gospel choir. I'd only went in order to hang out with my friends. So in the end, when Miss LaJoyce asked who was coming back the following week, I proudly raised my hand and said that I wouldn't be. But here we are, about a year later, and I've been back to gospel choir almost every Wednesday since. Mrs. LaJoyce is a special kind of human. She lifts our spirits when we are down, and she reminds us daily that we are not alone. When you are having a bad day, who do you call? Miss LaJoyce. She has a unique and personal way to greet each and every one of us, and she always seems to know exactly what we need.
Whether she prays on us, pulls us aside to talk, or just gives us a hug when we are able to let go and forget everything that is going on in our academic or personal lives. For 1 hour every week, we are able to let go, feel a sense of comfort and a sense of family and love. It's been said by many of our members the only reason that they show up for practice is for one reason and one reason only, Miss LaJoyce.
Today we would like to honor you with this award of appreciation. Thank you for everything that you have done for us in this university. Mrs. LaJoyce, we loved you yesterday, we love you today, and we will love you tomorrow. Gospel choir.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. This is so awesome. This has been 31 years of joy. I get more than I give. I'm going to ask all of our choir members, those who are active, those who are inactive. We got our director here. We got our recipient of the Martin Luther King Award. Don't make me call your names out. You know you out there. Come on up here and sing. We also have a gentleman who was a charter member 31 years ago, Mr. Kelvin Carter, and he came back for the festivities today. Please come. Oh my gosh. Please come up.
Oh, it's Lord. Oh my God.
Otterbein, thank you so much for giving me a platform to maintain the spirit of gospel music. And Oh my goodness. We got staff members that were in gospel choir that stayed and worked here, so it's just wonderful. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Hallelujah, salvation and glory, honor and power unto the Lord our God. For the Lord our God is mighty, yes, the Lord our God is omnipotent. The Lord our God, He is wonderful. Hallelujah,
Thank you all so much for attending this afternoon. As Rico expressed,